Welcome to this video in which I'm going to share with you the model that we use at Source 9 to making sense of emotion, making sense of behavior, and it shows you how 5 different variables all fit together so that you can truly get inside the hearts and minds of the people that you're trying to understand in order to communicate with them better, have more effective campaigns, and drive behaviors and also behavior changes. So this is the model right here. We've got these different elements that I want to take you through. The main 5 things that I want to address in this to share with you are: number 1, emotional needs; number 2, beliefs; number 3, thoughts and feelings; number 4, narratives; and number 5, the body. So we're going to go through each one of those 5 things. I'm going to show you how they relate to each other in relationship in a system of sense making and meaning making. Okay, so common understandings of the world are that there are things outside in the world and then we perceive them and make sense of them, and that's it. However, what I'd like to do is to pull the rug out from underneath that one a little bit and throw in some other variables too. So we don't just perceive the world, we perceive it through our beliefs, and those beliefs contain and shape and frame our world, and we make sense of it and understand that through story. And our emotions are responses to those thoughts, and the emotion is really a question that's ongoing within us at all times unconsciously. Are my needs being met? And there are 7 emotional needs that drive all behavior. And when we perceive, it's very important to say perceive, when we perceive that those needs are being met, we feel positive emotion, and when we perceive that those needs are not being met, we experience negative emotion. And then likewise, the body is linked to this cognitive and emotional response, and releases different hormones, and physiological things occur in such a way that they can build up inertia in the system, or they can affect our tissue, our very bones, our body, our how we're feeling physically, our posture. If you ever think about people that are in different states of mind, or actors emulating people in different states of mind, the body plays a huge part in that in terms of posture and how we carry ourselves, and it's all a reflection of how we feel, which is all a response to how we think, which is all a response to the stories that we're telling ourselves in our minds, which is all a response and contained by the beliefs that we have about the world. So the important thing about this model is to understand that reality is not one fixed objective thing. So when it comes to things like space and time that we can independently measure, fine, there's some objectivity there. But everything else, it comes down to subjectivity, and at best what somebody called Merleau-Ponty once called intersubjectivities. So this idea that there is no objective truth beyond our measurements of space and time. When it comes to the human experience, each one of us is a unique individual, but where we share beliefs, where we share stories, where we share culture, where we share experiences, and we learn to see the world in similar ways, then we can have this intersubjectivity of having this shared subjective experience of the world. But each and every one of us is creating our subjectivity at all times. So let's take this one step at a time. So let's look at this external stimuli that's in the world, this thing that's there. Maybe this is your message, maybe this is your brand, maybe this is your campaign that you're trying to convey to other people in order to drive some kind of behavior change. Maybe you want them to vote for something, to buy something, to go somewhere, to do something, to engage with you in some way. So in order to have that end result, we need to understand how all these different things fit together, and how putting this stimuli in front of different people will lead to different results. So behavioral economics goes into a fair amount of this concept, and the idea of like how we situate things, how we present things can lead to different behaviors. The relationship between different stimuli can lead to different responses. But what I want to do here is take that one step further and say, behavioral economics quite often looks at things and says, that's irrational behavior. We do these things and this irrational thing happens. And what this model is saying is, when you have enough understanding of what's going on emotionally and cognitively for people, so this cognitive empathy, so we're understanding the thoughts and we're understanding the feelings, then nothing is irrational and everything makes sense. So let's see if we can make that work here. So the idea is that we are perceiving the world through our lenses of belief. They are so important. They shape everything that we see. They have been building up from the moment that we were born. These are the experiences that we have in the world. These are the things that we've been told, the things that we've been taught, our unconscious assumptions, our schema, our very patterns for making sense of the world. This is your childhood, this is your trauma, this is your culture, this is the stories that you've read and experienced. This is everything that you use to make sense of the world, and most of it is running unconsciously, like a base program that's in your core that is making sense of the world for you at all times. It's also deeply related to the body, in the sense that the body keeps the score. There's a whole book on that in terms of how the body stores memory in terms of trauma, to try and keep you alive. Essentially, we are a species that is here and is evolving, and our bodies are very good at keeping us alive, and those survival mechanisms kick in and they store these beliefs that it perceives are crucial to your survival. Now, those frames give rise to certain thoughts and certain stories, because it's through story that we make sense of the world. It's how we piece together sequences of events and find meaning through them. If you are experiencing stories and thoughts that confine you in a certain way, they're going to define how you feel and ultimately how you act. I'll come back to this in a moment, but this is why people always want to control the narrative, because narratives create reality. They shift, they change. It's not fixed. As I mentioned before, reality is not fixed, but there are moments in time where shared realities are consistent enough for someone to get elected, or for something like delaying action on climate. Doing the rounds at the moment are some very carefully thought out narratives around delay, which are to say, for example, if we can get people to tell the story, we can get them to believe that yes, climate change is real and is happening and people are really worried about it, but the way to handle it isn't through net zero policies and taxing the poor or taxing the rich. And besides, there's much bigger countries who are really going to determine this, like the US and China and so on. Now, if those stories get out there, maybe even into the hands of the media, that could then frame the debate. It could change the way that people think and feel, and then that would change how they act. And those narratives are carefully researched, carefully crafted, and then promulgated through think tanks, through the media, out into the world. And they're there on purpose, just as you may very well want to purposely create a campaign to introduce people to your particular brand or your product, or get them to donate to your charity, or get them to campaign with you against for action on climate change and things like that. Likewise, there are people in the oil and gas industries spending billions of dollars trying to control the narrative, to understand how people make sense of the world, and to have an influence in that sense making, in that storytelling, such that people believe and see the world in ways conducive to them doing what they want to do. So everybody's doing it, so it's about understanding how to do it and how it works so you can see it for yourself. So these narratives then create emotional responses, because depending on that story that's playing in our head, we then make an assumption or an assessment, of, are my needs being met? And there are these 7 emotional needs that we use, in particularly from Marshall Rosenberg and nonviolent communication. He in turn got them from adapting the work of Chilean economist Manfred Max Neef, who was looking at ways of creating an economy based on human flourishing. And what would it look like, and how would we measure that? And what is it that leads to human flourishing? And he came up with 9 universal needs. I'll make a video on those and on Marshall Rosenberg's another time. But essentially there's this unconscious processing going on of, are my needs being met? And if they are being met, then we feel positive and we feel good. If the needs are not being met, and we perceive that they're not being met, then we feel negative. And that has knock-on effects to our bodies and so on. And ultimately, all behaviour is an attempt to meet an unmet need. We are all sharing these same universal needs. However, we are looking at the world through different beliefs, through different cultures, through different stories, through different experiences, through different traumas. And that is refracting, bending, distorting our perceptions of the world. So we are seeing it differently. And we could be looking at the very same thing, but having completely different emotional responses to it. Now, the other thing to say here that's really important is this is not a one-way street of perception. It is even more so about projection. So imagine the light doesn't just shine in through these lenses, it shines out like a projector, and it projects our beliefs onto everything. We are constantly mapping the world with our lenses of belief, and they are framing what's going on for us. They are curtailing and limiting what we see and how we perceive it. So this is a two-way process of projection and perception. So if we can understand what those beliefs are, and it's very hard to do so in yourself because you've probably been using them your entire life and you have no reason to think for a moment that there's anything wrong there, because what often happens is we mistake our beliefs about reality for reality. So this is this notion of the map is not the territory. Our beliefs about reality are not reality. They are beliefs about it. They are the map, they are not the territory. And therein lies so much of human suffering and conflict and all sorts. But stay with me just for a moment longer while I explain this projection part a bit more. So if we're walking through the world and we are projecting through these lenses of belief, we see the world that we expect to see. Now, if we can understand what those are, if we can understand what the stories are, if we can understand what the emotional responses are to those stories for different groups of people, then we can understand how to interact with them. We can understand how to create stimuli that's going to lead to an understandable response. We will be able to empathize and understand how that's going to land. And we can obviously test it too. The other interesting thing here is to say that this way of looking at the world also means that reality is not fixed, and we are creating it constantly. Subconsciously, unconsciously, we are creating it all the time. However, once we become conscious of these processes, once we start understanding what's going on in our emotions, and we understand the links between the stories and the beliefs that are causing those emotional responses, we can come to see that if we take conscious participation in reflecting on these beliefs and reflecting on these stories and the thoughts that we're having, this comes from the work of cognitive behavioral therapy, we can start to reflect and critically assess and let go of certain beliefs that hold us back. We can tell new stories, and we'll know when we're doing something right because we'll feel it. And that will be embodied experience. So much of what's going on in the world right now really is a consequence of lenses of belief that no longer serve us. Our culture, our values, we see the world in a certain way that for a very, very long time has served us incredibly well. In fact, it's been evolutionarily beneficial to carry and utilize the lenses of belief that we pass on from one generation to another through education and through culture, this reproduction of society. Much like how DNA confers information that's useful for keeping us alive from one generation to the other, so does our culture. However, what we're seeing at the moment, and I think what metamodernism is shining a light on, is that the stories, the lenses of belief that we've been passing on from one generation to another, which previously conveyed so much wealth, abundance and richness, and still do for a shrinking number of people, but they are still valid, and they have created the world that we are in, and that I am so grateful for. However, there are flaws in them. There's some deep flaws in them, which are resulting in things like climate change, ecological emergency, because we are running beliefs that no longer serve us, that are from an older time, that are from older traumas, that keep us in this growth-based economic model, for example. And we're in a time of great upheaval and change because these stories, these beliefs are changing. We are no longer in the old paradigm, and a paradigm is just a collection, a set of beliefs. We're no longer in the old paradigm, yet we haven't landed in the new. We're in this in-between stage where these beliefs are shifting and changing. So this model of understanding the world is useful at the individual level, and it's useful in terms of audiences, and it's useful in terms of the collective too. Going back to audiences, what this model suggests is also that we shouldn't just group people based on demographics. It shouldn't just be about like what age you are, what gender you are, where you live. Those are very useful for all sorts of different things. But in order to create stimuli that can be understood and can drive behaviors, what we want to be doing is thinking about what are the shared beliefs, what unifies people, and that could go across demographics. What are people's main values, beliefs, and stories that they use to make sense of the world? What are the emotional needs that are going on in people in relationship to a particular campaign, charity, product, brand? The relationship to the stimuli, essentially. What is the emotional need that somebody is perceiving to not be met? And then through participating in this particular action, by purchasing a particular product, associating with a particular brand, what is the emotional value that is being created for them? What is the emotional need? So we map which of the 7 needs, and it could be many of them, relate to that proposition, to that stimuli. And through mapping and understanding the beliefs, the stories, and the emotions, and grouping people in that way and creating for them in that sense, then what we're essentially doing is going, how can we create value for groups of people based on how they make sense of the world and how they're creating and shaping their own realities, which is far more powerful than saying, oh yes, we just want to go after people aged between 25 and 35 that do this, and that. That's very useful. But add this on as well. Think about the depth. Think about what is binding people together. What are the shared stories? And how do those relate to emotion? And how do those relate and convey and perpetuate certain beliefs? When it comes to behavior change, what this also means is understanding how to change beliefs. If you want to change behaviors, you have to change beliefs. You have to change stories. You have to help people to meet their emotional needs through new lenses of belief and new stories. That's really difficult to do. There's a lot of money spent on doing that. But when you map it and you understand it, it makes it an awful lot easier rather than just running on gut feel or assumption and guesswork. There are ways of looking at things where we can map this through qualitative research. We can meet with people and we can understand what's going on for them at a deep level. I'll just quickly pass on to this slide here as well. And this is to say, this is how we create reality, right? So as I mentioned earlier, our beliefs can be thought of as groups of belief, as paradigms. And then within that, we've got our next set down, which is our beliefs. Now, our beliefs frame and curtail and shape our thinking. Our thinking and our assessment and interpretation of the world then curtails and shapes and limits our options as we perceive them to be, which then shapes our decisions, and then our decisions ultimately impact our actions, and our actions then give us our results. So everything that's around us, everything that's going on for you as an individual, that's going on in terms of your communication with your audience, that's going on in society, everything around you that you have is a result ultimately of a thought or a series of thoughts, or a set of beliefs, and how they've made people feel over time that have resulted in everything that we have around us. So if you want to change the future, if you want to change behavior, if you want to shape how people perceive your brand, how they engage with your charity, how they engage with your campaign, then you need to start thinking about what are the beliefs, because that's upstream. If we are downstream of those beliefs, we're trying to interact or interrupt people's options and decisions making, then yes, there's lots of nifty tricks we can use from behavioral economics, but they are downstream of that larger set of beliefs and paradigms. And the kind of changes that we need so much in the world right now insist and compel us to go as upstream as possible and to start critically reflecting on those beliefs that are leading to that downstream swing of things, creating the reality that we have around us now. So again, there's the individual, there's the audience, and there's the collective. This can play a part in your life as an individual if you've got results around you in your world that you don't want. If you're not living the life that you want to lead, if you don't have the things you want to have, then go upstream and look at your beliefs. Look at what's creating this reality for you. Look at how you're shaping and making sense of the world and how that's making you feel, and then how that those feelings that are either positive or negative are pushing and pulling you towards either acting or not acting, and therefore having the results that you've currently got. So bringing this all together, when we want to make sense of the world, when we want to communicate with other people, when we want to be heard and understood, as everyone does, then to really do that, it's not enough to look at descriptive data. We can look at behaviours, we can look at what people say, we can look at what people do, and we can track all sorts of different data points through analytics. The world is awash in descriptive data, but what this model helps you to do, and this way of thinking, is to go inside, to go into the deep emotional motivators, to look at the stories, to look at the language, to look at the beliefs and paradigms that people have, to understand how they're projecting onto the world, how they're perceiving the world, and therefore how and why they're acting. And the key thing here is why, getting to understand why people do what they do, and then understanding how to interact with them in ways that they themselves are using to shape the world. Likewise, you can use this for your own development and understanding of who you are and what you're doing, and using this as a tool to reflect on where you're at and how you're seeing the world, and how you do actually have way more agency than you possibly realise at the moment. But once you start interacting with your own beliefs and your stories, understanding your emotions, understanding how your emotions and those feelings are linked to your perceptions of your needs being met, there's a whole world in this image that is waiting to be explored. And whether that's through self-inquiry or whether that is through qualitative research, understanding others, it's all there, and it's incredibly fun and engaging to participate in and to explore. You get to understand people, understand who they are and why they do the things that they do. So if you found that useful and you want to know more, by all means check out my LinkedIn profile, Rob Harrison-Plastow on LinkedIn, or you can find us at www.source9.co.uk. And I'm always available and up for chatting about this stuff more. So if you ever want to meet in the face-to-face and have a bit of a chat about these sorts of things, there'll be a link somewhere and you can get in contact with me. Other than that, I hope this has been useful for you. If there's any questions, put them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, not for my ego, but purely for the algorithm, so that this can then get this in front of more people. If you found it useful, just hitting like or subscribe teaches YouTube to show it to more people can see it and ultimately get to enjoy it as you have done. So until next time, thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll see you again.